Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Welfare Clinic, the show that you can call in and ask your questions relating to any housing problems that you may have. I have my guest today, Glyn Robbins, who has been working in housing field for almost 20 years and has been campaigning around housing, helping people in many ways, trying to resolve their problems. And I hope that you will call in. The number is on the screen. Do call in and ask your questions, and Glyn will try his best to answer your questions. Just to come back to you, Glyn, before the break I said to you that I will talk to you or ask you questions in terms of the waiting times. Now, it might not be just in this borough that we are sitting in, but in many places up and down the countries, you have people waiting for 10 years, 15 years, in some cases 20 years. Some people getting offers within the first 6 months, some people not getting any offers in last 10 years. And sometimes people quite rightly ask those questions, is how come my neighbor who's been here for 1 year already got so many offers, and I've been waiting for 10 years and I haven't got a single offer?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, unless you know somebody's full circumstances,
yeah, it's
you
difficult.
don't know how they've come to be in that position. And I understand, you're right, some people get very angry and resentful and, oh, it's not fair, they've only just been on the list and that. You need to know the full history. You need to know their full circumstances.
Of course, yeah.
But, you know, overall in the country now, we have 5 million people on waiting lists. So it isn't just Tower Hamlets. But as you say, in Tower Hamlets for many years now, and particularly people, and I'm sure many of your viewers will know of people or be in the situation themselves where if you want a large-ish 3 or 4 bedroom home, which doesn't seem too much to ask for, I don't think, in the 5th richest country on earth, that you can afford, and in this borough you might be waiting for 10 years, and this is not in any way untypical.
Isn't it funny though, the richer the country it is, that people seems to be suffering a lot more?
It's interesting. I mean, there might be a number of complex reasons for that. You know, perhaps in other countries, which I don't know as well, there are more informal ways of providing housing, and perhaps family networks play more of a role. But as I was saying earlier, I came back from the States recently, where I was looking at housing over there, and it's worse there than it is here.
I actually had that back of my mind, actually, when I asked you that question, because if you look at third world countries, they are poor, they are might not have so much financial support, but as you said, they might have loads of family and relatives support. But you don't expect, you know, people to struggle in so much, because, you know, you could move into a property with 1 child. Over the 10 years period, you might have another 2 children. Easily, and so that 1 bedroom with 1 child, you probably can just about get away with it, although it's technically overcrowding, but you still can just get away with it. But with 3 children in a 1 bedroom, that is like crisis.
Oh, it really is. I mean, Dickensian conditions in this borough still, you know, after all these years. I'm sure, again, you would know, and viewers will know, of families with 4 or 5 people in the same bedroom. You know, and this, as you were saying at the beginning, that has knock-on effects in terms of people's health, in terms of their mental and physical health, in terms of kids being able to do their schoolwork. You know, it's ruinous. It really can destroy people's lives. And that's why we must continue to demand a better type of housing policy that doesn't betray people in that way.
But when we have right to buy, and I'm not going to blame anybody, because if that offer was given to me personally, I probably would buy my property because I might want to secure for my child future, invest for my child future, which many parents quite rightly would do. But how is that solving? Is that really going to solve the housing crisis, or is it going to actually
well, it's going to make it worse. I mean, I think there's a simple equation here. Since the right to buy was introduced, I mean, bear in mind we're now having a second, or in fact 3rd wave of right to buy in this country. But since the first wave of right to buy in 1980, 1.4 million council homes have been sold. There are approximately 1.4 million families, not individuals, families, on waiting lists in the country. So as they say in the States, do the maths. You know, we've lost 1.4 million homes. There are 1.4 million households on the waiting list. it's like a hole in the bucket, the bottom of a bucket. You know, we could start building council homes, and there are slow signs of that beginning to happen. It's happening in this borough to a very small extent. But for as long as that hole is in the bottom of the bucket and people can buy, you know, it's hopeless, and as you say, it's making the situation worse. So I agree with you. You know, I don't think we should get into blaming individuals for taking those types of decisions, especially given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But something has to be done to
prevent
the
right to buy now
away.
may be extended to housing associations.
Well, it is being extended to housing associations. I mean, there's a bit of, you know, quite hard lobbying and campaigning going on around that at the moment, but I don't see any signs that the government are going to back down on this, and I think housing associations will find themselves losing homes in exactly the same way as councils have done
and
since
some of the housing
1980.
associations is relatively far more smaller than a local authority.
Less able to withstand that, and yet at the other end of the spectrum, you've got big housing associations like Genesis, who are active in this borough, saying we're not going to build any more social housing because we're at risk financially now.
And they can't do anything, can they? If there is a law that say that you can right to have,
it's a right. It's a legal right.
So as an organisation, they can't do anything, can they?
Except pull out, which is what they're doing, and I don't think they'll be the only ones. And again, what that
so there'll be less properties being built.
Even less houses being built, you know, and we're building less homes now in this country than we have at any time since the 1920s, which is again part of the reason why we have the crisis. So, you know, there's lots of different ways of looking at the problem and the consequences of the problem, but ultimately, until we commit serious government money to building the homes we need, we're never going to get out of this. I mean, I suppose we have to hope that the political climate begins to change, and that people recognise that actually there's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's true. You don't spend money on housing, you invest money in housing.
Yes.
And that's what we need to do. It's the same as education. You know, we need to invest public money in important public services like housing. And, you know, I think there would be a huge amount of support for that in the country. You know, I think if there was a vote tomorrow, do you think we should build more council housing? I know what the people of this country would say. It's the politicians.
It probably would be landslide.
I think so, undoubtedly.
Victory for yes campaign.
But of course, there's a lot of vested interests that don't want that. You know, and government don't want it for ideological reasons, and private property developers don't want it either because they make a lot of money out of what's going on at the moment. So they don't want to see a change. But then a lot of people are suffering as a result. So I think we have to, you know, insist that we can house the people in this our country.
This is the one question that a lot of people actually asked on this program, is what can they do to be given offer of a property, or what can they do to reduce not having to wait 10, 15 years really?
Okay, well I think there are some practical things that people can do. I think, you know, people have to give themselves the best possible chance of winning, and it is like a lottery. And if you think of it as a lottery, then what would you do to try and maximise your chances? Well, you would buy more tickets. And I think when people are filling in their housing choice forms, they have to tick as many boxes as possible.
But in some places you can't tick so many boxes as
but you know,
like to.
I understand why, and I think people are still doing it. They've been doing it for as long as I've worked in housing, being very particular about the area that they want to live in, for example. Now, of course, if you've got family nearby, that's where you want to be, but the reality is that if you have a far wider, if you cast your net wider, you're going to have far more chance. If you say you're willing to live above the ground floor, you're going to have far more chance. You know, if on the opposite end of that you say, I'm only prepared to live in Poplar on in a ground floor flat with a garden, your chances are virtually zero. So I think people need to be realistic.
But I think in some circumstances, it might not be all of them, some circumstances, as you have clearly mentioned, that they might have family around them, or it may have particularly single parents or people suffered from you know, abuse or disabilities, things like that. And they might be, or you know, some cases that they don't want to remove their children, you know, from the schools. You know, that they might be going to this school for a good number of years. They have their peers and, you know, got used to the environment of the educational institution. Disrupting just before they start their secondary school sometimes can be quite tricky, and sometimes parents try to balance it much as they can, I guess.
I think that's
so some
right.
people may have some good reason.
They may do,
it.
but I mean, I'm probably sounding too hard-nosed and too much like you know, someone who works for the housing office. But I think people do need to be realistic, and we're talking about town hamlets. I'm not saying people should agree to move to Stoke or Leicester or Ipswich, you know, which is happening because of the crisis that we have. But if we're talking solely about town hamlets or any particular borough, if it's Newham that your viewers are in, you know, they need to think about that as a relatively small place and a place where you can get from one side to the other in time for school at 9 o'clock. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's convenient. The important thing to also remember is that once you've got a council tenancy or even a housing association tenancy, the possibility is always there in the future to transfer.
So is there properties being built in every single borough in London, or?
Are there? No, I mean, there are in town hamlets, there are in Islington, there have been a few in Croydon. But we're talking in the hundreds across the country in terms of council housing, and we need hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
So this is just a pinprick. It's going to get nowhere near solving the problem. We need to talk about public land. You know, we need to talk about, there are big sites in town hamlets. I know we're not only talking about town hamlets, but that's where we are right now. There are big sites available in this borough that could have public housing. London Chest Hospital is a good example. You know, this is public land. It's a facility that has been owned by the NHS, by us. Now, I think we all know what's going to happen to a site like that if we don't campaign for something better. It's going to be private luxury housing at prices that most local people can't afford. So we need to turn the pressure up politically about public land, about the use of public land for public housing. But no, I mean, to answer your question, I think there are lots of boroughs where there is no council housing getting built.
Or any housing.
Or any housing of any kind. Well, I mean, obviously in London at the moment we're in another developer frenzy. I think another word of advice perhaps to give to people is, at the moment it looks like it looks like a market that is only going up. But that's not the nature of markets, and eventually markets come down. So I think people who are thinking about the right to buy, for instance, need to think very carefully before they make that commitment. I think the last time I was on the show we talked about this a bit. You know, there are bills associated with doing right to buy. People think about the discount, they think about the valuation, but they also need to think about service charges, and they need to think about having to make a contribution towards capital improvements, recharging. So, you know, and think about what may happen to the housing market in the future. It's not going to continue to rise. So without alarming people, I think anyone who's thinking about the right to buy needs to think about it in the round, you know, not just focus solely on the discount and the valuation. You know, think about the bills that are out there in the future as well.
Another group of people, just slightly moving from what we're talking about, staying with the subject, another group of people that will be severely affected is the young people. If you're under 25, you're pretty much is on the bottom of the list. Whether it's be education, especially universities, whether when it comes to housing benefit, any kind of support. And I think the argument is if you live with your parents should support you.
Right.
But you and I probably know many families, the parents is merely just about to survive, living on benefits and whatever, or working very few hours a week. And I think it would be very difficult for parents to support a grown-up child, really.
Well, I think almost impossible for most working class families in an area like East London. You know, I'm in this situation myself with my own daughter, and she's paying an astronomical amount of rent.
Yeah.
But she has no choice, basically. If she wants to live an independent life, there's no chance of her buying a place. So she's ended up paying around £150 a week rent. Well, that actually isn't bad compared to what a lot of other people are paying.
Yeah.
You know, but she's had to move right. She can't live in town hamlets now. She lives on the other side of London.
Yeah, and I think that's the many people finding that difficulties because they can't get a property in this area or neighbouring.
She's doing real damage to our community.
Yeah. We're going to go for a quick
Okay.
break, Glyn, and then we come back and talk about some of the policies that you mentioned. There's big changes, policies coming in. So do stay with us, viewers. We'll be straight back after this short break.